Welcome to The Morning Show with Carpo. Well, this morning, it's about 5:30 a.m. here in Portland. I got up about 4:50. I'll be honest, I couldn't sleep anymore because my 3-year-old climbed into bed with us, and he's got poop in his diaper. It really stinks. Just a little, just enough to just annoy me when I'm sleeping next to him. It must have happened in the middle of the night, but if I pull him out and get him all changed and dressed and everything, I just get up. Which is really a good thing. I mean, I like getting up early. So I got up and I checked emails and stuff, and then I said, well, I'm going to make a quick video, I'll call it the Carpo Morning Show as a joke, And a thought occurred to me. I was like, who the hell cares about, why do I make videos in the morning when I'm not even awake yet? Maybe it's just to wake up. It helps to inspire me and get me more, talking, since nobody else is awake yet. But most of all, it's because there's always somebody who's, who gained something from it that they say they were inspired by. And that's not my ego talking, that's just, I love hearing that. I love people, for example, yesterday when I busted out the bass and showed that I was, going to be playing music again, I had just one comment on there from somebody who said that they, had wanted to give up guitar because of their back pain, Kyle Butler. And I was like, I know how that is. I gave up guitar for many years. In fact, I'm looking at my acoustic right now. My son, who's staying with us right now, he's 21, or almost 21. He plays my guitar more than I do. I mean, I just don't play it very often. I have an acoustic, and I've always played it. So I kind of gave up on it when I was in pain, and sometimes people have to force you into it. When my brother sent me that track of that song yesterday, now he's been bugging me all night because he had our old drummer who's in California, he sent him the cut and he did keyboards over it, sent it back, and so now I have to do a bass line for it. But anyway, it inspired me, and when I made that, somebody else was inspired. Said they'd almost given up on music. And that's just one of those things, A person could be just on the precipice of deciding to be one thing or another, or to do one thing or another, or maybe not even a decision, but rather a person's just about to give up on some aspect of their life. And then something happens, something inspirational. We need inspiration in our lives. Whatever form it comes in. I have pity for people who don't have any passions, and I know that must be hard. Have you ever noticed the old addictive personality? If you grew up with a group of people who, let's say, did a lot of drugs. I'm not going to say I did. I'm going to say I grew up with a lot of people who took a lot of psychedelics and smoked a lot of pot, but we didn't do the hard drugs. We generally stayed away from them. I had my time with amphetamines for a while there, and yeah, that's a totally different story altogether. But when I do get high with my friends, or did get high with my friends, we would sit around and talk about life. And one of the things we talked about was getting high, because we were experiencing it. And when you get older, you'll find a lot of the people that I went to school with, or the people that I spent time around, who didn't do drugs, who maybe didn't get high at all, if they wait until they're later on in life, until they try something, they might become more addicted than the average person who, let's say, started when they were younger. Only because the person feels like they've been, especially if they've been sheltered, or their parents have kept them away from drugs. That's the worst, because, if your parents have forcibly kept you away from things, then you're more likely to want to say, well, screw you, I'm an adult now. Anyway, I've seen several people become very addicted later on as adults. Whereas people who grew up around drugs and drug users know, don't step down that road, that's a dangerous road. But other people might not know the difference. Now, the reason I brought that up was there was a point to that, because I was going to compare it metaphorically to playing music, I guess, and to passions. Because what I was going to say is, if you have a lot of passions when you're growing and getting older, you're likely to let them come and go one by one, and nothing's really that. No one passion really has to be your driving force. If you never had any passions all your life, like some people don't, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into something that you just fall in love with, I've seen people just go apeshit over it, and they just become obsessed over one hobby or one habit or one something, and it's just like all or none, kind of diving in and obsessing over it. I kind of envy that in a sense. People who are able to, let's say, pick up bass. When I picked up bass guitar, I picked it up because I'd wanted to play guitar for so long. I was about 14, 15. But for some reason, when I went to play acoustic guitar, my fingers were too big, and the strings would go, the finger would touch two strings instead of one. Well, that was my delusional youth, thinking that other guitarists didn't have that problem, because that's just a normal part of playing guitar. Your fingers are going to bump the other strings. You just have to know how to place them for the chords. My fingers are big, but plenty of people with bigger fingers than me have played some phenomenal guitar. So anyway, that was my decision to play bass, and that's when I picked up my first bass, not this one, but the Samick. And the 4 strings made it a lot easier for me, and I dove in. My passion was in it, but I moved back and forth, and then I wanted to play guitar, then I wanted to play drums, and then I wanted to abandon music altogether. I guess the drug analogy was the perfect one for comparing to music, because, the old sex, drugs, and rock and roll, those components of life that we seem to think are like something bad, like, I don't know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Think about that. What it really means to our culture when people say that. It's generally something that's kind of put down in the past, Sex is something we don't want to look at. Drugs are something we don't want to look at. Just put up a war and a wall, and rock and roll is something that, is the devil's music. And I gotta say, I've even heard some of my, I've said this before, one of my favorite speakers is Manly P. Hall, and he died in, I think, 1990, maybe before that. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is that a lot of his older speeches in the 60s and 70s, mostly in the 70s, you can tell he's, because of the subject matter, because he always talks about ancient history and archetypes, allegories, all the things that are timeless, but he'll always bring up something like rock and roll music and what it's doing to the children, and people who are addicted to marijuana, and how it's harming the people, and psychedelic drugs, stuff like that. Whoops. And I kind of laugh thinking now that, this was like a really intelligent man, but he just didn't understand, psychedelics were something new, and marijuana was kind of a new, as far as a big drug back in his younger days. I mean, he started speeches in the 40s or something. So he watched all this grow, and it seemed like the people who were listening to rock and roll and doing drugs were the ones who were the rabble-rousers, or the people who were trying to ruin society, maybe. And I can see how that perspective could come, for an old man watching it. But looking at it now, we realize that from a new perspective, let's say take the 2 of my favorite speakers, Manly P. Hall and Terrence McKenna, would probably butt heads all day long. They would probably get along on some spiritual planes and realities, but here's one guy's trying to seek all of it through knowledge, and the other guy's trying to seek it through awareness and psychedelic experiences. But they're both trying to explain the same end, the same God, the same world, the same life. They're both trying to understand what it means to be alive through different means and different avenues. Now, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, I won't even get into the sex aspect of it. The sex, I made a whole video about that a couple weeks ago, about how sex is just sold to our kids, and it's preposterous. Don't buy into the bullshit. Don't buy into the fucking media hype. Don't watch commercials showing you what you have to wear and how you have to look and what kind of gum you have to chew. It seems obvious to me to say, just ignore that shit. But people don't. They really think that they have to do that to be cool. You don't. You don't. As far as drugs, if you're going to do drugs, you better know what you're doing. That's all I can say. If you're going to get high and you're going to There's no need to try to justify or say, well, this is a drug and this isn't, or is a psychedelic a drug, or what defines a drug. It doesn't matter. Anything that alters your perceptions could be a drug. Something that doesn't alter your perceptions could be a drug too, because they affect body chemistry. So there's really no line drawn on what a drug is. Nicotine's considered a drug. So just throw the drug thing aside and say, well, if a person decides to get high, they're going to get high. And if they don't, they don't. But let's stop pointing fingers at each other and try to get along and understand that we're both seeking the same happiness and awareness. So let's move on to rock and roll, the main focus here. Got through sex and drugs. Rock and roll is an expression, a feeling, a way for people to get their... In fact, I'm going to a concert tonight. I'm going to see Trey Anastasio in Seattle with my oldest son and my wife, and we even bought extra ticket to hoping to find somebody to go, but nobody else wants to go, so it's cool with me. So we're going to drive up to Seattle and go watch music. It's like a 2.5 hour drive to go watch a couple hours of music, then drive a couple hours home. We love music, and we know what we like. Music drives me. It makes me feel great. Even if I don't want to go and don't want to drive, I'll still go. And it's because inside I do. It's just like the road trips I would take to go to Dead shows or whatnot, or when we drove to Cali this year for the last Dead show. It was just an amazing experience I'll never forget. You don't get that time back. But the music itself, I don't just go see a random band I've never heard of and go out of my way to see this band. I go hear music that brings back memories. Music ties you to certain specific times in your life. If the music you listen to, or that reminds you of your life, is from artists that no longer play, or you can't see live shows, you might be one of those people who have never been to a concert. A couple of my subscribers, one told me last year she'd never been to a concert. She's almost like 50, or maybe over 50, and I was like, wow, I guess that's common. A lot of people probably have that situation, but to me, like, if I were to live now, I'm almost, I'll be 40 this month. If I had looked up and never gone to a concert, there's just no way I could even imagine that. Like, it's one of the most moving experiences in your entire life, besides having children, or getting married, or some of the big days of your life, commitments, falling in love, all these things that happen. But as far as external influences that you're not bonded with emotionally, or rather that isn't bonded emotionally with you, that's not like a two-way street, music, that's where it's at. It's amazing what it can do. I'll be honest, the first concert I went to was in 1991. And I remember because I wrote it in my little diary journal thing when I was younger. I think I was like 14 or 15. I think I was 15. It's just turning 16, I guess. And it was at the Salem Armory. And it was Iron Maiden with Anthrax. And I loved heavy metal. I saw them, I saw Pantera, we saw, Black Sabbath when they came back around, and I really love metal. I've seen Metallica and all the regular, the big name bands, but none of it compares to like a Grateful Dead show or a Fish concert, because of the associating experience that goes along with the music. When you go to a heavy metal concert, you tend to just be into the concert, and the people around you, whatever. When it's at a Dead show, everyone around you, you're bonding with, like, yeah, right on, look, what are they going to play next? Or, and then you're out in the lot, and you're talking to people, and you're like, how was the show? It was great, they played this and this and this, and there's no competition among people to try to, the biggest competition is to who can be the smelliest hippie and have the oldest school tie-dye, because I'll tell you that in the hippie culture, there's this huge ego fucking factory going on. It's always been that way. The people who claim to be the most ego, that have ridded themselves of this, or the people who are like, just peace and love, bro. I've met so many of them, and I consider myself, I guess, one of them to an extent, but I had to separate when I realized that it was such a facade, These are people who are like, oh, bro, it's all good, but I can't help you out, man. I got stuff to do. Or, it's like some of these guys are really, really competing. I remember hearing a friend say, he didn't want to take a shower because he wanted to, didn't want to lose his stink. Just like, anyway, these are the cultures that go with the music, and cultures that develop around music. It's not. It's a way for people to come together, I guess, and that common thread, that common ground is the music itself. And without that, you can have the same kind of thing with, say, the country fair, or various other events that don't have a specific headlining band or music, but it's just not the same. I love music. It's a phenomenal thing, and it just opens up so many doors for me. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. What a subject for the morning, huh? I guess I'll let it go. It's getting too long.